Hello and welcome to Module 4 lecture video. So this module is going to focus on Chapter 7 and 8. So just to kind of recap for a quick second, so at the end of Chapter 6 we were talking about end of session feedback. So we're giving them end of session feedback so that we can remind them of the goals that they set, remind them of their strengths, and increase the chances that people will repeat exceptions that worked for them in the past, and also find new ones that come closer and closer to solutions. So that is important because that's kind of what you're leaving your clients with before you get to the next session, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, first things first, we're going to talk about taking a break. So taking a break is 5 to 10 minutes long, however much time you think you need. And what does that do? That gives you a chance to think about what was said and a chance to formulate the feedback that was important at the end of Chapter 6. And for them, this may increase anticipation or focus because they're wondering what you're going to say when you come back. So where do you go? It depends on where your session is. If it's in an office, you might be able to step out into the hallway or into another room, or you could take the person out to the waiting room and then come back to your office. If you're meeting in their home, maybe step into another room of the house. Or if you're doing it virtually, you could always, just turn the camera and the mic off for a second and come right back. So another thing that you could do when you're taking your break, if you wanted, is to give them an assignment during the break as well, or ask them to think about a task that they think might be helpful for their situation. Again, that could generate some discussion and help you with the feedback for them. Okay, so I set the groundwork. So let's talk a little bit more about formulating that feedback. So we've taken our break and now we're coming up with feedback for our clients. There are 3 parts to formulating feedback: compliments, a bridge, and a task. And it goes right in that order: compliments first, bridge, task. So first things first is compliments. So compliments are praising the person for what they want and usually helping them feel good about themselves. We want to highlight and affirm their strengths. And, I think that compliments also communicate hope. And it communicates that solutions are built on person's successes and strengths. So not some kind of magic or on the professional's opinion either. The second part of the feedback is the bridge. So the bridge is the link between the compliment and the homework assignment. So the content of the bridge is going to be taken from the person's goals, exceptions, strengths, and perceptions. That is where you can get the content for your bridge. So an example of a bridge might be, I agree with you that, bring up their goals, their exceptions, their strengths, and their perceptions. That's kind of what you want to do when you're doing the bridge. Don't forget, use the person's own words or phrases. This will help it make sense to them and not sound like you're talking in a foreign language when you're giving them feedback. The third step is tasks, or homework, if you will. And there are 2 different kinds of tasks that you could give to your clients: notice and do. So observing would be paying attention to when you're feeling more hopeful or when things are most like your miracle. You could have them take notes and bring it in the next time that they come in. Or you could do a behavioral task, the do task, which is taking action based on the information that the person provided. So I also have a handout that will kind of simplify some of the tasks that you might be able to give clients. So make sure you take a look at that handout and that'll explain that a little bit more. I'm going to stop there with the task part. Like I said, review that handout, and I think that will help you guys too. Some other useful messages for feedback is overcoming urges. There are a lot of times that you might work with patients who are struggling with urges or compulsions. The authors don't use the word compulsions, they use the word urges, they don't use the word urges, they use the word compulsions. Sorry. So useful for people who are trying to overcome urges. Might be something like drinking, drugs, anxiety, panic attacks, stuff like that. or maybe pornography, different things. So the task for them is to pay attention to the times when you overcome the urge to do whatever that compulsion or urge is. Pay attention to what's different about those times, especially what you are doing to overcome that urge. This is very, very helpful for that. And it also helps the person replicate success and use their strengths. Okay, so next session decisions. So first things first, you're going to assume that your person's coming back. If you have a criminal justice client, they more than likely will be back. But for others, we want to kind of set it up so that we're leaving it open for them to come back. So something you might say is, so when do you think it would be most useful for you to return and tell me about what is better since we're meeting? And in later sessions, you may ask if they need to see you again, but that's way down the line. So those are some ways that you can kind of set that up for yourself. Our goal is helping the person to build on their strengths. We do this by opening and sustaining dialogue around what's better for them. What is better since the last time we met? You want to engage the person in a search for exceptions that have occurred since the last time that you met with them. And also make sure you avoid putting them on the spot. If they can't think of something right off the bat, it's okay, work with it. That is important. So, but these exceptions are the path to success, or they are the path to the solution. So what happens in this type of work? We're going to review the exception, amplify the exception, scale the progress that your client has made, and figure out what the next steps should be. You're still going to take a break in later sessions so that you can develop feedback and whatnot for your patient. Always when you're starting the next session, your first question is going to be, what's better? And be careful with that too. You don't want to say, is anything better? Because you're kind of giving them a leading question and a closed question so they could just say yes or no. You want to leave it open-ended. So what is better? Because that's going to give them a chance to kind of think, okay, so what actually was better since the last time I met with you? Some of the responses could be better, same, not sure, worse. Those are pretty much some of the answers that you're going to get. And you can kind of keep pushing with that. What have you noticed that is a little bit like your miracle? Review the week a day at a time if you need to, if that works best for your client. If they can't identify any exceptions, we're going to cover this more in chapter 10, so don't worry. Once an exception is identified, even if it's vague, you're going to use the concept EARS, E-A-R-S. So E, eliciting the exception, A, amplifying the exception, R, reinforcing successes and strengths, and S, start again. What else is better? So when the person identifies exceptions, ask what it would take for that to happen again. Another thing that you're going to do in future sessions is scaling questions. Those are going to keep coming up because this can lead to more goal formulation. So that is definitely important. And some things you can scale at this point in the game would be progress, where you would say you are this week toward your goal, and their confidence. How confident are they in working towards that goal? If you need to change your goals or select new goals, that is an option. It is important to continue addressing goals because the client's perception of the goal will continue to shift as their perceptions of the problems and possibly their solutions do. So goal formulation in later sessions doesn't mean that you have to ask the miracle question over and over again. You could use your scaling questions to kind of come up with new goals, like I mentioned before. So just putting that out there. If you chose to use the miracle question again and that seems to fit in your session, by all means, go for it, but it's not part of it. Another thing that we're kind of always thinking about is termination. So in solution-focused work, you are always thinking about termination from the first session on, because our goal is to help them work towards a solution and be able to live a better quality of life. You're putting the person that you're working with in charge so that they don't need you. And that's why you're not really giving them advice. You're more or less giving suggestions. So in the textbook, the example with Ayan, the question that Peter asked was, what number do you need to be in order to not come back and talk to me anymore? So that is kind of, something that you might be able to ask in a later session too. What number would you need to be at so that you know where you're going with your sessions and you can assess like, how is this client doing? Um, so Jan actually was conflicted in the textbook about selecting a number. She immediately starts talking about being scared, alone, and keeping things inside. That could possibly happen too, because termination might sound like a scary thing to a client. And you don't necessarily have to say termination. You can just say, what would it take for you to not have to come and see me? Something like that makes it sound a little bit less scary, like termination. So Peter did change the way that he asked the question to her to keep things at a 7 or 8, and she was not ready to define a score for termination. But he still planted that seed that, hey, at some point we're going to get there. So just some ideas to kind of tie in the book into what we're talking about. And the last thing I want to bring up is relapses. So setbacks and relapses. There have to be failures to no successes. There are two sides of the coin. So most people tend to focus on the setback side, but it is, we want to focus more on, getting back up and starting over. Or well, I shouldn't even say starting over again, but getting back to the goals and the solution focus, the positive talk, if you will. It is natural for the people that you're working with to feel discouraged at setbacks. I mean, that's true for anybody, really. And it's true for a professional to feel, discouraged by a setback when they're working with a client too. So keep that in mind. I mean, you're scaling yourself too as you're doing your sessions. So what do solution-focused professionals help the person they are working with to realize? The times when they stopped fighting, didn't take another drink, and began to change their behavior. This is what they can build on. So even if there was a setback, there's still things that you can build on from that. But those things could definitely happen, and I wanted you to be aware of them. All right, well, thank you for watching this module, and we'll pick up in the next one.